Hi, and welcome to the breakout session on Cloud Identity and Access Management. My name is Bill Harmer. I am the Chief Information Security Officer and Chief Evangelist for SecureAuth. Today we've got three experts in cloud identity who have taken their time to join us. They are Susan Melvin from Microsoft, June Leung from Moneris, and Garrett Bechler from Ermetic. So Susan, if you would, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you and cloud identity access management fit in your world.
Sure. So Sue Melvin, like Bill mentioned, I work for Microsoft. I'm a technical specialist for cloud identity and endpoint, and identity and access management fits into my world every day. Most days I'm speaking to customers about how to implement zero trust, and yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining us. And next, if we could, June, how about yourself?
Hi, thanks, Bill, and hi, everyone. This is an easy one for me because my title is Identity Access Management. It is my specialty, and I'm passionate about it. So, like Susan, every day, every minute, I'm working on IAM stuff. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And Garrett, yourself.
Sure. So my name is Garrett Bechler. I'm the Director of Global Sales Engineering for Ermetic. As folks migrate to the cloud, the identity becomes a central point of focus for access to the entire world. And my job is to really help folks understand how that impacts them, since the cloud is a new and undiscovered country.
Good reference, and we'll come back to that, because that idea of an undiscovered country, I think, is very, very pertinent to a lot of what we're seeing. Myself as well, I spent 5 years at Zscaler, helping companies move into what we call a zero trust architecture, and I saw a key gap in there, in that there was no real thought, I guess, put on identity, right? It was hand me a SAML token and off we go, which I think leads us to our first question. So over the past 5-6 years, we've seen this massive move. Like we all remember the cloud first. Everybody was going to go cloud. Everything was going to go cloud. There'd be no data centers left, and we know how that went. But lately, it's been this push to a zero trust architecture. And I know that's a buzzword, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But when the pandemic hit, year and a half ago, people went over a weekend from a maybe work from anywhere convenience model to everybody work from home, so we continue to survive as a business model. And with that being the norm now, and quite honestly, if you look at the statistics and some of a lot of the benefits of working from anywhere, whether it's cheaper facilities, better option in talent hire, et cetera, this is going to stay, right? It's going to stay. So with that, what do you see as the role of cloud identity and access management in the future of cybersecurity? Garrett, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so, and that's a great question. And the broader challenge is the expertise in migrating to cloud services. And for most companies today, that exists of moving existing infrastructure into a global service provider to provide improved access, right? Or global public access, to literally mitigate the constraints of established infrastructure like VPNs and things of that nature. And while that permission cloud that goes with it seems okay at the top level, when you actually get in and start to look at the layers that go with a back end of a cloud service provider, that identity becomes the focal point of how things interact globally throughout the scope of the environment. So just because you move something and it has a lockdown set of permissions does not mean that that identity or that entitlement limits what can actually happen within the scope of that object, device, or service. So it's imperative that the identity piece gets focused on with the microscope to really truly understand how broad that reach may or may not be.
Fantastic. No, it's that cloud movement is pertinent to, I think, a lot of what we're doing today. Susan, how about yourself? What do you think here?
So I just wanted to add on to what Garrett was saying. Build on it. At Microsoft, we assume breach, right? verify explicitly, least privilege access. These are all key foundational components for identity and access management. Taking inputs from identities and endpoints and network signals. All of that is part of your identity and access management. Identity is one of our 6 pillars. I think it will be interesting to see the market trends now that the executive order has come out in the States and all of the money that's going to be invested over the next so many years. I think it's really going to be interesting to see this identity plane certainly develop beyond what we would have ever thought. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say like the identity is almost becoming that last perimeter? I've heard identity is the final perimeter. It's the common perimeter because it's the thing that follows. But would you see it becoming that sort of crucial in unlocking some of these things?
Absolutely. Like Garrett said, identity it's the source of truth, regardless of its location. It's who you are. Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting too. I want to get to June on this. So June, how do you think? How do you feel on this one?
Yeah, so to me, in addition to the human identity, there's also the machine identity as well, because not just human coming in, I also want to make sure the machine coming in it is authorized and it is valid, right? Um, well, I wanted to throw something other on the additional on the table is also as I see more applications, more people going to the cloud, I need to be more a preacher and more marketing person, because when people come to me, it's like, oh, June, I have this service now in the cloud. What should I do? And the first thing, and almost when they come to me, is not the first thing. They're not gathering requirements. They're like almost ready to deploy. The last thing they think about, the last perimeter, oh, let me contact June and see your identity and see what do I need to do. And at that point, I'm like, what about, I need to understand their solution. And I'm, in the back of my head is like, you could have contacted me earlier and I can help you with a lot more, because at this point, you might have to change a lot of your solution. Depends on what you need to access and who's accessing. So I see us being more the practitioners, mean we need to speak up more so that people understand it's not I want to be in your business, is I'm actually here to help you as an advisory role. So we need to be a better marketer of ourselves, let people know why we need to put our nose in your business, and number 2, advise them based on their requirements for cloud access, machine and
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, security practitioners like myself, I've been in security for the last 20 something years. I'm not going to say how many. It's getting too long. But we've always been that Friday 5 o'clock. Here's the solution. Can you security stamp it? By the way, we've got a deal on end of quarter that's going to get us 50% off if we sign it this weekend. But Monday it's expired, and we were in that position. I find, to what you're saying, it's now becoming even more narrow because some of the security functions we've done a good job in getting people to understand, look for a SOC 2, review the policies, see what the conditions are, make sure the contracts, but they're not thinking about identity. They're not thinking, they're
Right.
just going, how do you do it? Oh, you have identities? Okay. As long as it's got a username and password, the people out there looking for these solutions think, hey, that's good because, I have my 14-character password. And if we're lucky, they say, do you have MFA? And they go, yes, which can be, SMS, which is garbage anyways. So, they think that they're asking the right questions. Then they come to us and we're looking at going, oh Lord, no, please, you've just gone down a horrible path, and now we're going to have to try and find ways to do it. So you're right, absolutely, get in there and market this. Which I think leads us to our next question. So June, I'm going to come to you first on this one. We've got this decade of cloud first strategies. And there was that realization that not everything really belonged there, right? We were seeing the repatriation. We know that mainframes still do a fantastic job of what they do, so let them run in the background. There's lots of companies running them. AS400s are out there,
Yeah.
and then there's certain things that companies just say, "Hey, I don't want anybody else's hands on this. This is stuff I need to put my hands on because that's core to my business." And they're seeing that how to manage their business first. So. Identity, is this an untouchable on-premise tool, or a cloud implementation, or a hybrid, or how do you approach where identity and access management lives in your organization?
So I am re-evaluating every year because we have to just to see where we're at. Now we're on-prem. Should we move to the cloud? Should we not? And I think the main drivers here for my thinking is also because things that feed us, the application that I relied on, they're on the cloud. Applications that they depend on my data, they're also in the cloud, some of them. And so it'll be easier, if maybe I'm on the cloud. So every year I'm like looking at, should we move, should we not move? But I can tell you, with two new services that I'm rolling out, one of them is in the cloud and one of them I am keeping on-prem. After serious consideration, what are the pros and cons? So to me, it's still a hybrid right now. I'm not moving everything to the cloud, and I'm not old-fashioned saying that everything must be on-prem. So, do that pros and cons, balance, budget, finances, right? So
Even if you go down into identity and access management itself, right? Is there portions of that, you may outsource the MFA, but you're keeping the identity store? Do you see that as a hybrid, or is that no, we're going to keep all of the authentication methodologies, those types of things on-prem where we can control them, or no, it's a service? Because I've been hearing these both sides of the argument. I've heard ones where they say the identity store is going nowhere. It's staying with me because that's my employees or that's my customer. That's the lifeblood of who we are. I've heard that argument for 20 plus years. So, people get to the point where they go, okay, well, it's lifeblood, but it's also cheaper, better, faster, whatever they're picking out there. So we're going to try that. So do you think that the whole spectrum of identity and access management is going to start to break up? And maybe some people are going to become more commodity services and other pieces are going to be bespoke to an organization? Or do you think it should stay whole internal or external?
I think some of these data, if you look at the data element, they would maybe have to stay on-prem and depends on also some regulations. So for me, I'm doing the safe approach. Let's do one at a time so that when something goes wrong, at least I know where do I need to go? Where does it go wrong? So I'm not ready to sort of split responsibility for things that I
Got it.
manage at the moment.
Okay. Cool. Garrett, how about yourself? I know you're going to bring a different perspective to this from a vendor side.
Yeah, so not just from a vendor side, but as a security practitioner, much like yourself, I've been at this for a long time. I have a background in incident response. And when you migrate to the cloud, right, and that identity is typically tied to something that is on premise, right? Whether it's a hook into a default directory service that's been in existence since, who knows when, to a cloud purveyor of services, right? And whether it be a SAML or token, whatever it may be, to provide that bridge between that cloud and that on-prem. I mean, there are two big factors in this whole mess, right? And it is a pretty good mess, in that you've built up infrastructure over the course of time for critical services that is on premise, because that was the notion of how data had to be carried out. And some of those legacy systems can't simply be migrated to the cloud, maybe from a regulatory perspective, as June mentioned, but also from a tactical or technical perspective when you get to things like mainframes and things of that nature. So as you break into the cloud, per se, you're not getting that ability to bridge back to internal resources the way you would expect. And then there's the scope of control. But the broader problem is user behavior, right? I mean, you want to talk about teaching an old dog new tricks. There's what's comfortable, there's what's feasible, and there's what's secure. And the reality is, when you change the default behavior of how someone's going to interact with the system, especially a legacy system, changing the user behavior usually becomes the broader obstacle to adoption, whether it's cloud or on-prem.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I'm going to steal that. I love that one. That's fantastic. Yeah, user behavior is, we're building AI and analytics and using machine learning to figure out user behavior because it is so repetitious. So it's so ingrained. Muscle memory is there. Susan, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add to the user behavior. When you're looking at any of these strategies, it's key to have user buy-in. You need to have the user community with you, a representative that understands the old dogs with the new tricks, right? The folks that are resistant to change. You have to have that represented in anything that you do. But really, to specifically answer the question, I don't think there is a one size fits all for all of the organizations. I think it's pretty much all been said, but one thing I would point out is it's not if it happens, it's when it happens. You need to think about cloud resiliency when your identities are no longer available on-prem. You've been breached. Now what? If you're isolated on-prem, you've now isolated your core business from the rest of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's I think times where you want to do that. You take SpaceX, they're going to launch a rocket. Let's isolate everything, make sure everything's good. And then there's the flip side. If you went to a full cloud solution and you're a hospital, and there's an internet outage, no fault of your own, routing tables go down, something,
Yeah.
whatever. How do you then access patient data? Because this is care for life, right? You need to have instant response. And if you even talk to any of the healthcare industry about how to access, right? The push to accepts, the things that they want need to be fast, need to be quick. They need to be secure. There are regulations around it. They understand privacy. But you take a pacemaker, for instance, if you have a pacemaker, it's got your health record on it and there is no username and password on it. Nobody's going to put one on it. Nobody's going to force you, because if you're lying there flat on the ground, they want you. They want the data at that point, right? That's an acceptable risk. And I think as we preach this, as we talk about it, as we get people to understand, that term risk always has to come up. It's no longer about the necessarily the best solution. It's about what reduces the risk to the level that's acceptable for the organization. What's their risk appetite, and how do we handle that?
And I just want to add one more thing to that. What's your business continuity plan?
Absolutely.
Identity is critical in that. People often say, without the network, you have nothing. Okay, I see that, but without identity, you also have nothing. So what is
You
your
really have
business
nothing.
continuity
Yeah.
plan? Right? Okay, you have a network, but you have nobody to use it. So
Exactly.
I don't think. Yeah, it's not a one size fits all. That's for sure.
Very true. Very true. So here's a topic that in this spectrum that is near and dear to me, and I think everyone will agree. I hope you agree. We all hate passwords, right? 80% of breaches in 2020 were weak or stolen credentials. The phishing is massively automated and extremely mature. Like, I mean, the phishing messages, I have respect for how much effort they're putting into this. And when you look at sort of those breach credentials, 94% of them were reused credentials, because the human brain is really good at holding three things. And that's typically super secret password for your bank, the secret password for work, and then the throwaway one because you want a 20% coupon at Zappos to get shoes, right? And they tend to be variations of themselves simply because we've done this thing where we just said, make it harder, make it longer, add more complexity to it, continue. And it gets to the point where you, in your head, the magic formula that your hands can type that will get you through the conditions. And it's usually variations of it. So given that as a backdrop, do you think that we will ever get to true password authentication, passwordless authentication? And do you think it will ever become a global standard? So, Susan, what do you think? Excellent! Yay! Big round of applause on the answer. Yes.
No. Yes. To me, it has to start at the top. And when I say the top, I mean the large organizations like Microsoft. We've provided a plane out there, Azure Active Directory, that gives you that jump start to passwordless. And then from there, it's Windows Hello for Business, FIDO2 keys, authenticator applications. Really, my message would be iterative. Don't look to boil the ocean right away. Take small strides. Chip away at it. You can achieve passwordless quite easily, actually, in organizations. As an example, when I first joined Microsoft, I had to create my secure password the day I started. I have not had to type it since. I use my Hello for Business. I use my authenticator app. It's going to be passwordless. Yes. Period.
I think you're absolutely right. The user experience will be passwordless, and I think we need to definitely get there. And then I think to add on to that, standards. We need industry standards. So Microsoft, Apple, Google,
Right.
Okta, SecureAuth, all of us, we need to come up with an agreed standard so that way we can truly remove the password. So we get from a passwordless experience to an actual passwordless, where the application on the other side or the system or service does not expect to see that, even if it's tokenized in the back end like we do in some situations. So June, how about yourself from Moneris? The financial industry, regulatory requirements. It's interesting because regulations, I think, is part of what holds us back at times, because the regulations say you must have a password that is blank. Not blank. Sorry, not blank. That is, here's the conditions for the password, and to go passwordless violates the regulation. How do you approach it on your side?
Well, the thing is, so with organization, I think with what Susan talked about, it is feasible. We're not there yet. I can't wait till we get there, because I also have a password challenge myself. So with the thing is, with the regulations, it does have, when you use MFA is three things. So it doesn't have to be something it has to be something, right? And we all know that. So I think I don't know if how it would be feasible outside of the organization, right? Like for the regular user from the regular website, if there's a solution out there for those websites, which a lot of folks access, not just the organization one. So I'm moving towards passwordless within my organization in the future. I'm not going to say near future, because there's a lot of dependencies, not hardware, this version, that version, not as simple as just roll out. I looked into it, but there are different dependencies. I'm moving towards it, and I can't wait till we get there.
Fantastic. Garrett?
To echo essentially what's been stated, right? So it's absolutely possible. From a global enterprise perspective, you see it adopted in pockets, right? From a business perspective, you go to a restaurant or you go to an Apple store, right? There is no PIN or anything being done. It's all done through face of the employee to actually register everything. Now they're actually scanning an object or an item, right, to actually authenticate the specific user to generate the transaction itself. So you're starting to see that that inflection point of usability and adoption. The broader challenge is, to go back to June said, it's not just as simple as being able to put a solution in place. There are still a lot of dependencies. Again, you go back to that legacy app piece where maybe APIs for being able to process that type of transaction don't actually physically exist and need to be created. And maybe they can't be created, right? Year 2000 switch over, all of a sudden there's a big run on COBOL programmers to try and rehash a language that really wasn't being used anymore. Well, there are a lot of legacy apps in a similar type of situation where, in order to actually migrate your enterprise to a passwordless based approach, you'd have to have some transaction medium that allows you to accept it. And then when you migrate that to the cloud, you're going to a constantly evolving back end that really kind of changes at the drop of a hat to either add function, add capability, so that a standard that you may come up with may not be applicable a year and a half from now, because we need to actually process a transaction differently within a given service provider. So it's definitely a fairly daunting challenge, but I can't wait to get there, because it's trying to remember a 22-digit password that's different for all 400 online retailers that you subscribe to is not necessarily feasible.
I'll be honest, like, regardless of who I've worked for and what products we sell, I have always said, at least for the last, I don't know, half dozen years, the best thing any organization can do for their employees is buy a password manager, pay for the license for it. That will minimize your blast radius, because when GoDaddy gets popped, the username and password in there, yeah, it might be bill@harmer.ca, but there's a password in there, and they can brute force that. They have plenty of time, because it's going to take them 9 months before they even make it public. And then my employer is going to have no idea that I had an account there, right? So, and that's where we see a lot of this. So if you want to minimize the blast radius of all of the other things that happen in the world before they attack you, get your employees a password manager that auto generates passwords that are long, complex, and aren't easily remembered. Which is sort of, I guess, interesting into the next question that I have for you guys. It's around the concept of automation. So we're seeing automation in most critical components and being used as an effective security program. Just there's so much data now, and I'm going to use the buzzwords, and I always hate it if I have to use buzzwords, but artificial intelligence and machine learning are being brought to the forefront of security in how we respond to it. Just things happen so fast that humans can't respond quickly enough. There's user fatigue on incident management. There's boredom, human mistakes. Those types of things are all being I won't say fully eliminated, but mitigated with automation in the security realm. So where do you see automation playing a role in identity and access management? Garrett, let's go back to you on this.
Yeah, so we see it every day, especially in the cloud services where you now have the notion of entitlements based on not just an identity itself, but the role that identity may have or the asset that it may actually have access to. So you have to start to absorb that data and process it in a manner that allows you to assess the risk associated with each individual component. Very different than what we've had to do before. And again, going back to that evolving landscape on the back end of those service providers, you really do struggle with what's actually happening once you migrate those things to that medium. And so that identity, which is that last frontier, may have a broader scope of controls. And when you look at a lot of these dashboards, they're meant for the add-on piece. And if you have to navigate 5 dashboards to figure out what something can or cannot do, you've really increased your sphere of risk by a couple 100%. So if you don't use some form of AI, some form of machine learning to actually understand what those interactions look like or what's physically capable, you're really missing the boat on what your exposure to, in most cases, the public may be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Could not agree more on that. Susan, where's Microsoft on the path of automation in this area?
Yeah, so there's opportunities to look at in terms of how you can improve efficiencies within your organization. User onboarding and offboarding, protect those orphans account. You don't want those exposed. You really want to be watching for lateral movement within your organization. Data governance and stewardship. You need all of these components. Making sure people have the appropriate access to just enough and just in time. All of these are part of the identity and access management suite. And then on top of that, it's the CASBs of the world, and the SIEMs and the SOARs and all the good buzzwords that are going on. All of your automation tools to protect your organization from password breaches and lateral movement. Really, those are the big concerns.
Oh, I think you're spot on. Like just the feedback out of a CASB or a DLP, being able to demote or promote authorization or authentication, maybe step up authentication should we see something popped somewhere else. And then even having as far as dynamic authorization so that, Bill's allowed to do this at this time under these conditions because the situation denotes it, sort of the old break glass permissions that we would have in an emergency. June, how about yourself?
I think just the last point to add was really we need to embrace automation and we need to do it. And because everyone has labor shortage, so we're not going to get more people or skilled people that we need to. So how do we do more but with less automation? So I think the key is look at the risk that you have, identify those areas that Susan mentioned, and then say how to automate. Because once it's automated, it's done. We know that machines don't change. If we don't change it, the script doesn't change unless we change it. So those becomes static, and then we don't have to. We can just worry about something else because those foundational critical processes has already been taken care of by putting time into automate it, and then it just worked beautifully on our behalf.
Absolutely. And I also see it on the front end around, the telemetry that we see from devices, from position, geolocation, time, posture of a device. You can denote a lot. And if you start combining them together, an Apple Watch with a phone and a computer as the watch walks away, but the phone and the computer are still there, you're going to do a step-up authentication, because if something happens, maybe the person's just gone to get coffee using the restroom, something like that. But if the phone walks with it, okay, now we've got a different context, right? And it starts to be able to build us out in the context, or the awareness of context for it. Taking that perspective, I'm just going to throw a little bit of a curveball question then. Self-sovereign identity. Here's where it gets a little strange. If we're going to bring all this together, if we look at the identities that are in the Zappos of the world, and the on-prems, and as we move from organization to organization, because maybe we change jobs, and personally, I think gig economy is taking off massively and will start to be more prevalent, where people were contract based or task based. Moving that around, where would you see identity? Would you think enterprise will push out to self-sovereign, or do you think it'll be a government regulation stipulate self-sovereign and gets pushed back in? Susan?
Well, I still think that enterprises are going to dictate how they're going to use their identities. Regardless of what's going on around them, they're going to do what's best for their business at that point in time. I don't think organizations are thinking 5 years out for identity. That's my opinion. But yeah, that's my thought.
Cool. Garrett?
Yeah, I think it's a hard sell, but I see portions or pockets of that, right? As you get more towards an electronic identity, from thinking of something as simpler as your driver's license, right? Your state issued ID, and that becomes more of a frontier based object. So you start to actually be able to tie your work identity to your personal identity through something that is specific to you, right? Or hopefully specific to you. And you may be able to actually breach some of those things, but I don't see certain companies, based on what maybe a type of assets you have to access, that being plural to multiple services.
Gotcha. Looks like we're getting the wrap up. June, I'm sorry, I was hoping we could get to you on that last one as well. But I just, I want to take a quick second to thank everybody for joining us today. June, Garrett, Susan, it has been an absolute pleasure hearing your perspectives on this. And I would like to thank Brian and the conference organizers for putting this together. Guys, is there any last minute things that you want to leave the audience with? June, let's go with you.
So I think we're just gonna thanks everyone again. I think for us it's just continue persistent. If you believe in something, even passwordless, it can happen.
Yeah. Be iterative. It doesn't have to be big. Just start somewhere. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just be smart about it, right? It's understand what the risks are, and then just do your due diligence, right? That's a lot of it. Make sure you sell throughout the organization as you make that approach.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I want to say thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the concert, and I will turn you back over to the organizers.